Okay, this video covers Dr. Stevens' Intro Greek, Chapter 5 on first declensions, which begins on page 53. So I encourage you to get your book out and turn to that page so we can work through it. So I should start by doing this. I just noticed I meant to do something else here. So this video should not be as long as the one on Chapter 4 because I already went through case and kind of walked through what case is all about and how to locate the various parts of a noun when you parse out or locate a noun. So I won't want to rehash all that. If you're not sure about case, remember case, you remember, and you're not sure about the paradigm, you need to go back and watch Chapter 4. But with the case, you get nominative, genitive, dative, and accusative. So if you're not certain about that, go back and watch a video on Chapter 4 and I'll walk through that. So in Chapter 4, you were introduced to the beginning of the Greek noun morphology system. And I said in that video, in just 3 chapters, you're going to get the entire noun system. And so here we're getting into the second piece of the 3 parts. In Chapter 4, you were introduced to what, well, let me back up. There were 3 chapters because there are what they call 3 declensions or sort of patterns of endings to the morphology in the noun system. And so in Chapter 4, you were introduced to the second declension. Why were you introduced to the second declension first? Well, because the second declension has the least amount of sets or paradigms. It's the easiest, really. Most people consider it the easiest to learn because it has the less to memorize. It's the way most grammarians think. So almost all grammarians start with that one. In Chapter 5, we get to the first declension. And I don't, it's easy. It's not I find it sometimes to be even, for a lot of students to be even easier than the second declension, so it's not too difficult to grasp. Now, the first declension, which is what Chapter 5 is all about, are going to be vowels. It's called, these are vowels that in all of the morphology endings either have an alpha or an eta, pretty much, most of them. There's one that's kind of mixed up, you'll see at the end, but an alpha or an eta all the way through. And so here's the thing you got to know about the second declension alpha, eta, pattern endings, okay? It has 5 sets, okay? Now, in the second declension in Chapter 4, you only had 2 sets. Remember, you had a masculine neuter set, a masculine feminine set, which had singular and plural endings. Then you had a neuter set, which had singular and plural endings. Well, there are 5 sets in second declension, but don't be afraid. Don't turn off the video and drop the class. It's not that bad, really. It sounds like a lot, but really it's only like, if you learn the first 2 sets, you kind of know the rest. It's not that bad. So the first set is called Eta Pure. He's going to introduce you to that, introduce that one to you on the bottom of page 53. And I have it on the board here. Try to save a little bit of time. I put it on the board. And I'm going to erase this now. That, these are nominative, genitive, dative, and accusative. I'm going to erase this so I can write the stem of the word out here. So this is your nominative singular, genitive singular. These are your singular patterns, and this is your plural patterns. These are going to be, if you say, well, why 5 different sets? He says this in the textbook when you read through, but because nouns that fall into the first declension, depending on the last letter in the stem, they'll have slightly, the ending patterns will change just a little bit. That's why you have 5 sets. So, for example, for set 1, they call it the alpha pure. These are all nouns at the end of the root, the end of the root of the word. They have either an epsilon, a iota, or a rho. And I think for the mixed set, which is down on page 55, these would be nouns that end in sibilants, like sigma, psi. You don't have to know that. If you go, guys, do I have to memorize which set they are? No. You don't have to know which noun fits what set. That's just so you understand. This is why there are 5 sets, because the nouns have different letters at the end. What you really need to know is these charts, okay? The Eta Pure chart is really important. This you need to memorize. I encourage you, put it on a card, write it, learn it. Learn it to the point that basically you can see this on an end of a noun and know that that's accusative plural. Oh, that's AS, that's an accusative plural. Now, you're going to notice there's a little bit of overlapping here. In those cases, let's say you were asked to locate a noun like that, and you had the accusative, you had the alpha sigma. You're going to go, oh, that could be genitive singular, or it could be accusative plural. Well, in locating, you would write them both. You just put them both, because the only way to know the difference is context. You're going to get some overlap like this, but not all the time. So if you should memorize these endings so that, for example, if you get an alpha nu, that's accusative singular. So you see the ending and can recognize and locate it. That's what you're trying to learn here. And so to see the word, and they give you on what is that chart 5.2. They're going to give you a sample word here, cardia, which is heart. So cardia, if you follow that pattern, if I were to write cardia in all of these and just add these endings to it, that's what it looks like when the word is inflected. So if I said take cardia, which is the vocabulary term, and inflect it, I think there's some exercises. Yeah, on page 58 and 59, these are what all those exercises are: 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. They're saying take. They're going to give you a noun and they're going to say um, work this, give the inflection according to the declension pattern. So you're just adding the endings to that word. So cardia here would be a nominative singular feminine. If you were asked to locate this word, you would have memorized your vocabulary. This is the end of your vocabulary, and you would know, oh, I know that. That's heart. And you've memorized your ending pattern. You see the alpha by itself. You go, oh, that's nominative singular. Now you may say, well, how do I know the gender? Remember what I said in chapter 4. I'm sorry, yeah, the chapter 4 video, that gender sometimes can be differentiated. So for example, in that second declension noun system, noun pattern that you had in chapter 4, there's actually a neuter set. So if you have a noun with a neuter ending, because you've memorized that neuter paradigm, that's neuter. If you have in this second declension from chapter 4, if you have a noun that's a masculine singular ending, you really don't know if it's masculine or singular just by the spelling. The only way to really know the gender of most nouns, is to have memorized the article that they put with it in the vocabulary list. The article, you haven't learned this yet, it's in the next chapter, but the article in Greek is distinct and separate. They have a different form for all three genders. And so one of the ways that grammarians communicate what the gender, masculine, feminine, or neuter, is of a noun is they put the article with the noun in the vocabulary list. So for example, flip your book to page 62, and you'll see there, agape is the first one under vocabulary 5 list. Agape, and then you see that eta right after it, and then it says love. That little eta, that is the article. You haven't learned that yet. That's in chapter 6. But that, when you learn the article, you'll know that eta is a feminine article. That noun is feminine. The only way to know it's feminine is to memorize it with its vocabulary. You have to memorize with the vocabulary. Now, I was asked an email the other day of somebody that said, well, should we be learning all the articles, memorizing them with our vocabulary words? Here's the thing. Yes and no. I mean, you can get by on all your tests and survive Greek and get through. And I tell people, if you're really struggling, don't worry about the article with it. Just learn the vocabulary. That's really what you need to know. If you want to make your own cards and put that article with it and try to learn the gender along with the vocabulary word. So I have a vocabulary word that says cardia on it. And I'm trying to learn that vocabulary word. Well, on my vocabulary word, you may want to put the article. If you look at page 62, you see it has an eta. It's at the very bottom of that list, right above that sort of divider line. It has an eta, which tells me it's feminine. So if I write on my card a little comma eta out here, I know as I'm learning that vocabulary word, maybe I'll learn that it's feminine. That'll signal to me that it's feminine. That's not super important. If you're kind of struggling to get along, the most important thing is learn the vocabulary word. If you're not sure about the gender, say you have a second declension noun and you're giving it on a quiz, on a test, and I say locate this, and you may say, oh, I know it's genitive singular because I've memorized my endings, but I don't know if that's a masculine or feminine noun. Well, just write masculine / feminine, and you'll be okay. I know that you know at that point what you're doing. So it's up to you whether you want to, at this stage, whether you want to you'll be helping yourself out in the long run learning Greek if you try to learn the gender along with the vocabulary. It's really the best advice. But what I say, if you're trying to survive here and you have to prioritize, learn the vocabulary word. Like, you're not going to survive if you don't know the vocabulary words. So learn that. Okay, so cardia, and then if I were to locate, let's say I had, um, card, uh, yeah, looking for the accent, cardia. Let's say I gave you this on a test. What would be the location of that? Pause for a second, just think about that. I said locate or parse that. What would it be? Okay, so this would be, you would see this word on the test if you've memorized your vocabulary and you've memorized your endings. You see this and you say, oh, I know that ending. It is a dative, that's the iota, singular, and if you have memorized the gender, it's feminine. It's a dative singular feminine from cardia. That's the lexical form. So that's how you would locate. So this is the first set. A couple of observations before I go on to these last couple of sets because it'll move real fast here. Notice some things that are helping you out before you get too overwhelmed. You've already started, you may have picked up on this in the second declension from chapter 4, and you're starting to see it now in this declension as well. Anytime you have dative, anytime you have the iota there, you're going to have dative. Look at that iota there. You have dative, right? The other thing you're seeing that stays pretty consistent is that Omicron nu. Like this is your friend. Omicron nu is genitive plural, and you're just going to see that over and over in every pattern system, okay? So there's a couple little tricks to kind of help you start to get this stuff down. So if I see an iota subscript, it's going to be dative singular. Doesn't matter what whether you're talking second declension or first declension. If I see an iota sigma underneath there, I know I've got dative singular. If I have an omega nu, I know I have genitive plural. One other thing that will help you out in thinking through the alpha pure and the whole first declension, and here it is. In the first declension, even though you have 5 sets, this is good news. The plural stays the same. Like this is it. For all 5 sets, this is going to be your plural endings. So if you learn this as your plural ending, you've just learned the plural endings for the entire 5 sets of the first declension. The only thing that's going to change here is the singular ones. And here's what you're about to find out. They don't change very much. So see, I don't have to erase that. Let's talk about the second set. The second set is called eta pure. Okay? Let me erase this so I don't want to get too confused here. The second set, which is on the bottom of page 54, they call this the eta pure. And these are nouns that end in eta. But look at the set. Isn't this interesting? It's not all that different from the alpha. It's just got an eta. So the other one was alpha, alpha sigma. This one's eta, eta sigma. So if you know alpha sigma is genitive singular, eta sigma is the same thing. It's not all that much different. Eta with the iota subscript, just like the alpha the iota subscript, and then the eta, and then the nu. So the plurals stay the same. Look over and you see that inflected with the word agape and table 5.4 on page 55. You see, just walk right down. See the agape. So you have agape, which, sorry, I'm thinking P and I wrote a P. I think Greek. Agape, and there's your ending, there's your stem. And so if I were to write that stem all the way down, I would be able to locate those. Okay, same thing. So that next chart just gives you that ending inflected. Now here's the third set. You see the third set in table 5.5. Notice the plurals are going to stay the same. Nothing's changed. And the only thing that, and these are nouns that end in sibilants. You don't have to know that. That's just explain why you have a third set. Why do you have another set? Nouns that have different endings on their stems. But here's what matters to you. All that matters to you is what are the endings? Well, your plurals haven't changed. So if you memorize that, you got them. The singulars are the only ones going to change. But watch this. They're just a remake. It's a mix of the alpha and eta pure. So it's really not even a new set. That's why I really don't think it's that difficult for most. And it's not like learning the new set. If you've learned the first 2, you know this one. In other words, if I see an eta sigma, notice the interiors are eta. This looks just like set 1. This just looks just like set 2. And the plurals stay the same. In other words, if I see a noun with an eta sigma on it, and I've memorized that as genitive singular, you don't need to know, is it from set 1? Is it from, set 2, the eta pure, or is it from the mixed set? You don't need to know that. All you need to know is I see an eta sigma, I know it's genitive singular. So you're just memorizing your endings according to the case. Okay. If you flip to page 56, you get in 57, you get the last two sets, which are, they call them minor, he calls them minor variations because they're more rare. And there is some slight difference here. Notice in both 5.7, the set 4, what they call the eta sigma, and then in the 5.9 on page 57, what they call the eta pure contract, these are going to stay the same. By the way, I should say this, 5.9 on page 57, you're going to look at that. Don't get confused. He's only giving you the singular side. He's not listing this side in the chart. Why? Because it's the same. It doesn't change. Okay? But if you back up to 5.7, you get the set 4, which are nouns that end in the eta sigma. And notice the ends you get here. There's a slight variation with this weird OU, Omicron Upsilon there. The eta and the eta nu. Iota subscript. But notice, again, it's a 4th set, but nothing to learn. In fact, if you've learned from the second declension that the Omicron Upsilon is a genitive singular, you may see a noun in a sentence and go, oh, I know that's genitive singular. You may not know whether it's first declension or second declension, but that doesn't matter. You've correctly located and correctly translated the word. And look, this isn't any different. If you know eta with the iota subscript is dative singular, eta with the nu is accusative singular, you've got this pattern too. It's just there's some slight variation depending on the noun. But if you learn set 1 and set 2, you basically have this. Okay. The only other difference is with the last set. It's going to be, he doesn't list it there, but these are the same. And then, well, this is different here. And then you get basically it looks like an eta. It looks like the eta pure. Notice it's the same thing with the eta pure. The only difference is you have a circumflex accent on top. That's it. And the reason is because they call it a contract vowel. Two vowels have come together, and the result is one's hiding behind the other, and you get a lengthening of it. So he explains this in the paragraph right there on page 57. An epsilon, what's happened in the contract is an epsilon and an alpha came together. This was on the end, the epsilon was on the end of the word, whatever the word is. Here is, the sample he gives you is gay, earth. Okay, that's the sample he gives you. So what's really happened is it's like this, added with the ending. That's what's really happened. And the result is they have squeezed together and combined and lengthened into the eta. Remember, the eta is the lengthened form. And in order to demonstrate, to notify you that, oh, we've got a contract here, that there's a letter hiding behind the other one, they put the little circumflex over it to signal that this is a contract vowel. That's all there is to that. But again, 5 sets, but it doesn't matter because if you learn the first 2, you've got the last 3. Okay, so that's the entire, that's the first declension.